80% of businesses never sell, yet Mitch McGinley has helped 70% of his clients exit successfully, while most brokers barely hit 20%. If you've ever thought about selling your business, you need to hear what he's about to share.
Whether you own a fitness studio like Mitch did, or a service-based business, or any other kind of company, the reality is that most owners don't plan their exit until it's too late. So today, we're sitting down with Mitch to break down how to maximize your sale price, avoid hidden costs, and make your exit on your terms. So welcome to Own the Exit. Mitch, thanks so much for joining us today, man.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the show.
Come on. So tell us real quick before we jump into talking about business and exits and everything you've accomplished for yourself, for your family, for your clients. I think our listeners would be interested to know where you are physically right now and why you're there.
We just landed in Florence about an hour and 15 minutes ago. We flew over here from Madrid. We've been living in Madrid now for 6 weeks. We wanted to do a semester abroad, is what we were calling it, as a family. My kids are 11 and 8. They're finally old enough to travel and carry their own bag and be responsible in that way. And
that makes
they still
travel
like
so
us
much
and want to hang
easier,
out with
right?
us. So much easier. Backpack and a roller, and we're all doing it. And it's the trip of a lifetime, honestly. We posted up in Madrid. We felt like that would be the best place to learn Spanish and get exposed to the Spanish culture. And then we're just traveling from Madrid as much as we can. Mm-hmm. And so this is our ski week for the kids. They get a week out of school in February for some reason here.
Okay.
I guess everyone goes to the Alps and goes skiing. And so we took off and came to Italy, and we're going to go to Florence and Venice and Milan. And then the best story is this is where we went on our honeymoon. Wow. Spent 11 years ago, we spent our honeymoon here, and we went to this little town called Siena. And it was the most beautiful place we'd ever seen in our lives. And we sat there and we're like, if we ever have a daughter, we're going to name her Sienna. And tomorrow we're going to get to take our daughter, Sienna, to see the place that we named her after.
That is absolutely amazing. And we
cool.
were talking before the show, right, in kind of the pre-production conversation about how none of this would be possible if you hadn't been able to build a successful fitness studio, but then exit that and build a business around the skill sets that you developed in that industry. Tell us a little bit of your backstory, right? How did you get to the point where you could just take your family to Madrid and Florence and going all across Europe? How did you get to the point where you could build that kind of lifestyle by design and freedom for your family? And how did you do it through a Pilates studio of all things? That's really intriguing, I think, to anyone.
We've just done this, and I'm 43. And so I'm always inspired by the stories that I hear from people who are making these big changes in their 50s and 60s, and they're touting their favorite accomplishments that just happen way later in life. And I think one of the things that's the most normal, and you guys talk about this all the time too, is we all want new challenges. And you might build something awesome, but if you have that entrepreneurial itch, you're going to have it again and again, and you're going to want to keep doing it better. And the way that we got into this, I worked in hotels. That was my first career. My wife and I were always into yoga. She's an amazing yoga teacher, among many other things. And we basically got presented with this opportunity to buy our favorite yoga studio. And it was something that we always wanted to do. The owner just called us up one day and said, I want to sell, and I want to sell to you. And it was the right time. We were confident enough to do it. We had enough money to make this little acquisition happen. And we owned this studio for 6 years. And we ended up selling it for 5 times what we bought it for.
Wow.
And we were so proud of that. And somewhere along the way, I started doing some consulting work. I started helping other studio owners in this space, whether fitness, spa, health, wellness, all the same service business model. And when we sold our studio, I just started helping other people with selling. And it just naturally happened. And 2 years later, I decided to create this brand of boutique fitness broker and just exclusively help people in this industry
Wow.
because I love the industry. I love the people. Everybody's trying to make people happier, healthier. They're part of their community.
Hmm.
I love it. I love it.
So were you thinking of ever selling when you got into this and you acquired the studio? What was your thinking there? Like, we were like, I'm just going to do this for forever. All of a sudden, 6 years later, you're selling it.
Honestly, all I could think about was throwing away all my suits and ties and putting on stretchy yoga pants, but flip-flops and t-shirts and Lululemon. There's so much when I look back at what made this all possible. It's a comedy of errors. And I think that's true of most entrepreneurs. It's like you might look back and some of the most difficult things that you've ever gone through were what gave rise to what came next. And so when it started, because I got in a fight with my boss at the hotel and I felt like he didn't appreciate me. He was trying to skip me on my bonus and I was mad about it. And then I was upset and I manifested this yoga studio happening. And so all I could think about was getting out of what I was doing and getting into this other thing, not thinking about the end at all. And one of my favorite, Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, the second habit is begin with the end in mind. And most people don't do that. They start these businesses because they're passionate about it and they don't think they're going to get tired of it. And it's a very natural thing to get tired of it. I think managing people is really difficult. And when you have a team of people that you have to manage and do all the HR stuff with it, it gets exhausting. And I don't think most people think about the end when they're getting started. And that's something that I'm really hoping to change.
Yeah. No, I love that. And you're not just a broker, right? You've lived this, and that kind of makes you uniquely qualified. Like you said before, you sold your own fitness studio for 5 times what you paid for it, which is tremendously successful, especially over 6 years. And you're talking a 5x multiple over 6 years. Anyone who could get that kind of investment opportunity would take it. And so I want to hear, like, for you, when that happened, what was that moment like when you achieved that goal, right?
Anyone who's been there knows that it's such a mixed bag because it's such an emotional process, especially if you give birth to a business and grow it and the blood, sweat, and tears, and then to sell it, a lot of times is a very emotional process. It's difficult to do. And then throw in that it's a really difficult process. It takes 6 months, a year, maybe, lots of highs, lots of lows. And inevitably it's when you're finally done, it's so surreal to be done and to think, oh my God, I don't have to worry about texts that the teacher's going to call off tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Or I don't have to worry about the rent payment next month or whatever it is. This huge weight just slowly starts to just crumble away from your body. And you realize that you're free to do whatever you want. And you've got hopefully a bunch of money in your pocket and some time to treat yourself for how hard you've worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when you're talking with potential clients and what an nice opening line, right? Hey, I did this, I exited, and I can help you do the same, right?
Yeah, and that's really what it is. It's
there.
Walking the talk.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you look at, it's funny because if you look at our Instagram account, shameless plug here, but my wife has started doing our Instagram recently, specifically for this reason. We're taking video all day, every day in the most beautiful places all over, just documenting this stuff. But we want to inspire people to let them know that it's okay if they want to sell their business and it's okay to dream of something else. And it's totally possible and you can sell it and you can get paid. I think some people think it's wrong if they get paid. There's like some altruistic. This is especially true in yoga, but I see it a lot where it's, somebody else is just going to mess it up. I'll just close it down when my lease is over. And in that scenario, everyone loses. It's the clients don't get to keep taking class. The teachers don't get to keep teaching and the community suffers. And so I think it's been really incredible to bring this value to everyone involved. The buyer, I've been a seller, I've been a student, all of those things. these communities get to continue and thrive and get new energy and have new life and new blood and keep growing. And I think that's what entrepreneurship's all about.
That's
Yeah.
cool. I'd love to just ask you another question on this. What did you do during that 6 years to create that value? Did you just 5x the amount of clients you had, or how? It sounds like you were just doing it for the love of it and it just grew. But at a certain point, you're going, man, this is increasing in value.
It was fun to see that happen.
Yeah.
I think it's important for everyone who's buying a business. I think you need to see where you're going to add value. When you're looking at a business and thinking about what's your skill set, what are you really good at, and then you see a business that's lacking that thing, that you're going to be able to improve it. And so for us personally, it was customer service. I had worked at the front desk of a fancy hotel for a really long time. I like to think that I'm really good at customer service.
Yeah.
And as happens with these types of businesses very often, the customer service wasn't great. There wasn't a specific person sitting at the desk selling stuff, just greeting people, saying hello, making sure they felt welcomed, and then getting them into the best program for them, the best class, the best teacher, hearing how it went, hearing about their day. And so my job, truthfully, to answer your question in a long-winded way, I sat at the front desk and that's what I did. And I got to know everyone who came in the door and give them hugs, just giving people hugs all day long, watching people walk in all stressed and then walk out. They were on the best drugs in the world.
Wow.
And that's what I did.
That is cool.
So your passion behind it, what I'm hearing is your passion behind the industry was critical to you, because you have to believe that what you're doing is about more than just generating income and making money. There has to be some kind of higher purpose that's attached to the thing that you're building if you're going to build it and not burn out from building it. But then that's a double-edged sword, because you are so passionate about it and you are so personally invested, and then you start thinking about selling your baby. But when you start thinking about selling your baby, I think there's probably some hard truths, I would imagine, that you've learned and that you probably have to communicate to your clients now who are on the same trajectory and path. And so I know that you've worked with now over 60 different fitness studios, right? Brokering sales. You've closed just over the last year over $10 million in deals in this space, in this very niche space. So you have as much or more experience than anyone in this kind of space, right? This is what you do. What's the number one mistake that you see business owners make when they're trying to go sell their business?
I think number one is limiting the conversation to one person because they got approached.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the most number one mistake that I see. Someone approaches them and says, hey, I'd be interested in buying your business. And they just engage in the conversation and go along with it because they don't want to make other people aware that they're interested in having this conversation. A lot of times they feel ashamed or guilty for even thinking about wanting to sell. And a lot of times it'll be a competitor or maybe a teacher, someone who, it depends too, like we do work with franchise businesses as well as independent brands. So we get both sides of that coin. And when you have an independent brand, it's something that's really unique that no one else is going to be able to. We put ads up on websites like Biz Buy Sell. And we always find people who are looking to buy businesses like this, but they're not personally connected to this particular business. And what I've found is that leveraging offers between those two types of buyers, you need the buyer from the outside who's going to look at it a little bit differently. And you need a buyer from the inside who knows the business and loves the business. And if you can get offers from both and leverage those against each other to get the right price and to get the person that you want it to be, then you get the exit that you really want. And as a seller, being able to choose and have some say in that is the best.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of these, especially the independent brands you mentioned, are probably concerned with who's the buyer, like not just how much is like the dollars, but also who's taking this over, who's going to care for my clients, the teachers I have, my legacy, continuing that on, I would imagine is a huge part of the conversation.
And I truthfully, I had 2 different deals last year where the seller accepted significantly less money to sell it to the person that they wanted to grow the community going forward.
Yeah.
Wow.
Huh.
Wow. So that's an interesting thing. If you're a buyer, you're thinking about buying a business, because there's a big movement of that. I'm sure it's like all the Cody Sanchez stuff, buy Main Street businesses, and all of these seminars and conferences that are popping up left and right. And everybody thinks the wave of the future is just buy an existing cash flowing business and improve it, which I think there's some merit to, right? But when you are a buyer, it seems like one of the most critical things to understand is that selling price is not always, and maybe not even often, the number one priority for the seller and what they're looking for. There's more there. And I think a lot of people probably just assume if I'm willing to pay the most, then I can just get the deal, right? Or that kind of assumption. But there's so much more. And it seems like in the space, in your niche of these boutique fitness studios, that's probably even more so the case because they are so community centric. So what are some of, I guess, the across the board, if you were talking about all businesses, what would you say are some of, outside of just sale price, what are 2 or 3 of the other kind of top seller motivations, the most important things to sellers?
So choosing a buyer that's actually going to make it across the finish line is critically important. There are so many people who will kick the tires and drag it out and ask you a million questions for 6 months and then say, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
And that's devastating.
And that's your
Right?
kind of your
and that
job,
happens
right?
to everybody.
As a broker is to vet those buyers, right?
Very much. Yeah. And it's huge. And then my goal is always in that scenario is just to drag out the process and answer as many questions as we can before the seller's actually under some kind of contract with them.
Yeah.
Because the worst is you get under contract with an LOI, it's exclusive and you can't engage with anybody else. And then all of a sudden you're beholden to this one buyer who's dragging it out and not following through. And you can waste a whole year trying to make it happen.
Wow. Yeah.
Do you typically see, and I'm just curious on the transition of these smaller businesses, the independent brands, does the owner typically stay on for a period of time as part of the deal, or are they usually just, hey, you're out, we got a new team?
It's always a really interesting negotiation point. I would say it's not usually the new team. I think most buyers want to step into something that's very stable. They don't want to have to make any changes. They just want everybody to keep doing exactly what they're doing so that it doesn't get messed up. And there's a lot of owners in this industry too who wear too many hats. They're the owner, the manager, the lead teacher, the lead trainer, service provider, whatever. And a lot of times they're very difficult to replace. And so it ends up being really important too that the owner isn't too involved in the day-to-day business. That someone else can actually step in and take over those roles. Transition wise, usually it's 2 weeks to a month is included in the deal as part of the deal at no extra cost. If the seller is going to be staying on beyond that, certainly in an employee capacity, they should be getting paid. But for the most part, I generally advise against it. I think once you've sold your business, and speaking from experience, both as a buyer and as a seller, I think it's better to just move on. There's something that feels very weird about being an employee in the business that you grew and having somebody else telling you what to do and watching them make mistakes. And then you're hearing people complain about them and they're complaining to you. And you're like, I don't want to hear this anymore. That's why I sold it.
Yeah.
You can't go tell the new owner because that's awkward. And so it's just, I say take the money and run.
Yeah. Run to Florence. So I know in a lot of your content and stuff like that that you put out, you talk a lot about doubling business values before you even list them. What are some of the biggest value drivers that start with obviously the types of businesses you work with, boutique fitness studios, but then how do those, what are some of the common ones that you focus on, the biggest value drivers for businesses in any industry? How could they, as they begin to think about, I'm going to sell my business in the next year, 2 years, I'm moving toward that, how can they implement things that double the value of their business in a short period of time?
This is universal. This does not apply to just any niche. This is true of all businesses. Number one, you have to show your profit.
Mm-hmm.
If you are writing off everything under the sun to minimize your tax liability, when it comes time to sell, banks will not lend someone money to buy your business because they're going to think that it doesn't make any money.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to show your profit, especially in those last couple years. And even if it's just 1 year, do it. It's worth paying the taxes. It's 10 times better to pay the taxes because of the value you get in the sale. And without losing anybody, if you write off $10,000 worth of stuff, maybe you pay $3,000 or $4,000 in taxes on that. But $10,000 is what, a 3 or 4x multiple. That's 30 or 40,000 that you would be getting in a sale, and it's worth it. Just pay the taxes. And I know it's counterintuitive because we all own these businesses so that we can do all this stuff, and it's part of being an entrepreneur. But showing your profit is number one, and you have to do it years in advance. So that's critical. Number two is having your staff in good places where you've got some leadership. It's not all about you as the owner. You've got policies and procedures that are clearly written, job descriptions, all of your HR policies, all of that stuff. Buyers love to see that stuff because that's usually, HR is the thing that most people are afraid of. There's so much compliance stuff I've lived in California for the last 20 years. Like, the amount of compliance that we have to do is crazy. And so if you don't have that stuff dialed as a seller, your buyer's going to completely freak out that they're not going to be able to do it on their own. They need someone to hold their hand through that. So that would be number two. Number three always surprises people, but I call it planting seeds. I think it's really important to start talking about selling. And the main reason is when it's 2 years away, you can talk about it without freaking anybody out on any level. Be like, okay, guys, listen, I was talking to my wife earlier, and for the first time, we're really thinking about selling our business in a couple years. And I think you guys would be perfect to buy it. And so no pressure. This is years away. Nothing for you to worry about. The business is doing the best it's ever been. But if you're interested, let me know, and I'd be happy to talk about it.
Wow.
And that's it.
So that's just prepping people so you're not springing it on people. Is that, if I'm understanding? Yeah.
But also gives them
totally.
an anticipation build. There's a psychological factor where it's bouncing around in their mind a little bit early. That's not a lot of pressure, so they're actually thinking about it. Because if it's like, hey, I'm selling my business, do you want to buy it? I need to know in a month. Then they're probably going to be more likely to just say no. But if it's like, hey, a couple years from now, I'm thinking about selling my business, I think you'd be a great buyer for it. Now they're knocking it around, and they're maybe thinking about how to strategize, how they could do it, that kind of stuff. Yeah, well, that's really smart. That's really a great piece of advice.
We've had so many deals work out for that reason.
Yeah.
And it really is, it's the people in the community who make the best buyers. And so if you've got 3 or 4 candidates who would be good buyers, it takes time to wrap your brain around. Maybe it takes having a bad day at work, like I did. Maybe you plant that seed, and 6 months later, that person goes into their job and decides they don't want their corporate job anymore. And they come to you at your business and say, hey, I hate my corporate job. I'd love to talk to you about this. And then you have a lot more leverage as a seller because now they're coming to you.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, okay, I was going to wait another year because I want to get the number up to this. But if you give me this number, then we could probably figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much of we're talking about the different things you can do in your business for a sale and mistakes and different things. And it seems like it's such a long process. This is any industry, but you're saying 6 months, 12 months, for the actual sale process. And then even a year or multiple years before that, even of setting the stage for that, of getting everything lined up, maybe mentioning it. So it sounds, is that a lot of what you do then, is like consulting? It sounds like, because you have such knowledge of the inner workings too. It's not just like cold calling a fitness studio and being like, hey, you want to list your business with me? Sounds like a very long process of working in relationships and cultivating those. And because everybody will eventually sell, maybe, but it sounds like it takes years.
I think everyone will eventually sell. And I think just saying that out loud is always smacks people across the face. You will exit your business one day, whether you want to or not. It's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might as well prepare for it. But yeah, I work with people, and I say this freely. I will talk to anyone anytime. No pressure. I love helping people. And I think a lot of times in 30-minute or 60-minute call, I can share some of those things that really make a huge difference, where maybe it is just showing their profit on their tax returns. And that's really the only mental switch that needed to happen for them to double the value of their business.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally possible. And I love taking those calls. I love it when people reach out and say, I'm not ready, but I'm thinking 2-3 years down the road. What can I do? Here are my numbers. And we can pretty quickly give them a benchmark. Okay, if you wanted to go right now, here's how we'd look at it. Mm-hmm. And so then when they are ready, it's not all brand new and it's not so overwhelming. And it's more of just executing the strategy that's been in place for a while. And it makes the whole process infinitely better.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think most people, when they think about selling a business, the first thing is it's primarily just about finding the right buyer. But I know that you've said quite often it's the hidden costs and the bad deals that hurt the sellers the most. You mentioned before that one of those kind of hidden costs or bad deal factors is buyers who walk away at the last minute. But what are some of the other things that folks who are looking to sell their business don't really see coming, but that you see happen often?
Oh man, I got goosebumps when you asked that, because I've got trauma for days. It's the main ones that I see. Number one, it's really important to have all your financials clean.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to trust your profit and loss statements, your balance sheets. Surprises in those places can ruin anything, even if they're just honest mistakes, and which happen in accounting all the time. And I think that's a big one. I think a lot of sellers think their business is worth more than the rest of the world tends to think. It's
Right.
You think you've created this incredible brand, and it's got the word that we joke about all is potential. Like, people talk about how much potential their business has, and that's not how people base valuations. They don't base it off of potential. They base it off of performance.
Yeah.
For businesses like this anyway. It is a function of how much money you have actually made over the last couple of years, not how much you could make if you changed X, Y, and Z, because then that's the value that the buyer is going to get when they add X, Y, and Z. And so that's a running joke in our world.
Yeah.
The word potential is just, it's not going to help you. And so you need to not have potential. You need to do the thing yourself, see the benefit of it, and then sell it before that trend changes. Because if you wait until you're trending up, everything's looking good, everybody's feeling solid, you're making the most money you've ever made, and then something bad happens, the energy of the whole thing just goes straight in the garbage, because now everyone thinks it's going down.
I would even imagine, even if you plateau, if you can show year over year revenue and profit growth, eventually in any industry, in any market, you're going to hit some sort of plateau where you're just sustaining and maintaining a little bit, right? And if you do that for too many years before shopping an exit, then a buyer doesn't see as much potential to improve the value, right? They don't see the multiple potential. So it's really about timing the sale when you're as close to your peak revenue with what you've been able to put into place and what you've been able to implement, timing the sale to as close to you hitting that peak revenue without showing a plateau. How do you consult business owners on how to map that trajectory and anticipate when that's going to happen.
Hopefully it's very early in the process while they're still growing and they
Mm-hmm.
get to hear it then, as opposed to after something bad happens.
Mm-hmm.
And bad things happen to everybody in every business. They can't all be your best year,
Mm-hmm.
usually.
Yeah.
For me personally, it was year 4. We were tired after building this thing for 3 or 4 years. Our son was 2, I think, at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and my wife was pregnant with our second, and she had a really difficult pregnancy. And my father-in-law fell and broke his back. And all of a sudden, it was like 2 of my key people were completely out of commission. I was responsible for running the studio. I was responsible for the 2-year-old and doing everything I could to take care of everybody at home.
Yeah.
And the business suffered. It's a normal thing to happen. And what we had to do, and what I then coach people on doing, is you have to reverse that trend. You got to stop the downward trend. You got to fix it. You got to invest in whatever it is that's going to change that trend, get the trajectory going back up. And then when you get back to where you're feeling good, then sell it.
Yeah, there you go. So you had mentioned before, like when you exited your studio, it was a mixed bag of feelings. There was the holy crap, this is amazing, I can do whatever I want, and then there's the holy crap, everything I've spent the last 6 years building, I don't have anymore, and I feel like I lost a part of myself. And so there's an emotional side to selling a business. And I think it's probably, if our conversation, if I'm understanding the things that you've shared as well as other conversations with folks, that's the side that people don't usually prepare as much for. They're not usually ready for what they're going to feel after the deal goes through. So what's the hardest part about letting go?
That's so on point. I don't think I could say it any better. It's a loss of identity, I think, that everyone deals with differently.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're an owner and a decision maker and a boss, if you want to think of it in that sense, people treat you differently when you're no longer in that position. And for the people who have been around you, whether it was staff or client, the way that they treat you changes in that moment. And this is true of all relationships. I think you broaden it to anytime somebody goes through a really significant change in their life, all of their relationships change too. That's a very natural thing. But when you sell your business and all of a sudden people who you thought were your friends stop talking to you or something like that, like it hurts a little bit. Like, I don't mind talking about feelings on this show. I feel like this is a great show to talk about feelings.
Yeah.
We all want to feel like we really matter to everyone. And all of a sudden, when you're not the employer or you're not in that position of power to give somebody something or to be, it's even to joke about like having status in your neighborhood, which I think business owners do. There's a real loss there. And going through that, I think personally for me, like the part that I think makes me so good at what I do is the empathetic part. It's being there for everyone involved in a deal, for all of the feelings that happen. And so much of what I do is like being a counselor or a therapist. It's just to pick up the phone and hear somebody out, hear their concerns, hear their feelings, whatever they are, acknowledge them, make sure they feel heard, and then do whatever I can to move it forward and communicate what needs to be communicated. And so I think that's all it is. It's just you have to do that self-reflection throughout the whole process. And you need someone that you can lean on to help you get through it. And a lot of times your spouse, your partner's not the right person. They've got a vested interest in how it goes. The buyer or the seller, the other party is not the right person for sure. Because buyers are paranoid, sellers are defensive, like those don't jive. And having someone like me who's just always there to pick up the phone and talk through whatever it is really incredibly valuable. And it keeps deals from falling apart because somebody freaks out over something that they shouldn't.
Yeah.
I think I would liken it to like what you mentioned about the specifically discovering that relationships that you defined more as friendships, but you realize after the fact that those are far more transactional than you thought they were. Those relationships, I've had that exact same experience having in a previous venture, leading a large team and all of that, and feeling like we developed this really strong community and relationship dynamics. And I consider these people my friends, and then step away from that and you realize there's really only one or two of them that actually were your friends. Everyone else, they just liked you because you were the leader or the boss or the guy, right? Like they were, and there's some like realization of like what I thought was network of relationship and community within this business or within this venture, within this team or whatever it is. It's not only, I can sell the business, I'll still have these relationships. There's maybe that expectation. These people will still be my friends. They'll still want to hang out. They'll still want to go do stuff together. And they don't, because they liked you because you paid their paycheck or you provided a service that was valuable to them or whatever it was. Right?
And it's so true. And then that brings it full circle to, it's more important to focus on your family. Don't feel bad about selling your business. Everyone else is going to go on living their life where they care about themselves the most. And so sure, it's gossipy or there might be some buzz or chatter about it, but like in 2 days, and this is always crazy too. I always tell buyers this, it's the moment that buyers take over as owners, I always warn them about everyone is going to be trying to sell them on something. Like I wasn't prepared for it when we bought our business and stepped into it on day one. All of a sudden, my calendar was full with sales calls. Everybody in the world's trying to sell you a marketing platform, and all the employees want their idea or their new situation or better schedule or whatever. All of a sudden, it's just everyone's jockeying for their own position. And you just have to realize that none of this stuff is really about you. It's you're providing a service and you just provide it. And when you're ready to not provide that service anymore, it's okay to move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
We touched a little bit on the loss of identity. And so what would you say, I guess, what would your advice be to a business owner who sells like what you did and now they don't have anything? They got money, but maybe their self-worth was tied up with that, or they were busy, they had something to do, right? And now you're just sitting in Spain with a bunch of money, but it's what's your purpose, or how would you advise people, or do you have any thoughts on that as far as what's next?
I think it's important to have an idea about what's next, but truthfully, the openness that you feel after you sold your business, when all of a sudden there are infinite possibilities for what you could do, is pretty overwhelming. Because, oh my God, like I never thought I'd be a business broker. That was nowhere on my radar.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to keep consulting. And sure, it's a different side of the same coin, but it's my brothers, come work with me in this thing that he does. And then my other buddies like, come work with me in this thing. And you start looking around, you're like, I could do that. And then you're shopping around for a business to buy because now you got
right.
some money and you're like, okay, I'm gonna step up my game. I'm gonna go buy a business with an SBA loan, like all the people we're talking about in our feeds. You get overwhelmed with the infinite possibilities. And so I think it's good to have an idea and to have a plan so that you're not just sitting around doing nothing, because that's never good.
Yeah.
But also just be open to the fact that you don't need to have it all figured out. Take some time off, go somewhere else, focus on self-care. Chances are you haven't been doing it for the last couple of years. Go treat yourself and then manifest what you want to manifest next.
Yeah. That's really
Very
good.
cool.
Really good. And it's such a good conversation. We're going to go into the last kind of rapid fire round. We call it the exit round. We ask every entrepreneur and guest that comes on to the show the same 5 questions. And so we're going to dive in kind of rapid fire style. Aaron, why don't you kick us off with question number 1?
Well, yeah, we ask this to everybody. I'm sure you've heard this question before. What's your all-time favorite business book?
Think and Grow Rich.
All right.
Nice. Napoleon Hill.
Classic.
It's a classic. What percentage of your current income would you say is fully passive?
10% for me right now, which is not a lot, but I'm very fortunate I brought one of my sellers on with me after we went through that process, and she is perfect in every way. Her name's Kristen Abel. I'm just going to give her a shout out real quick. She's always listening, but she's worked with me for the last couple of years, and she's it's just me and her and my wife, as I mentioned, but she's doing her own deals now. And we're to the point now where we can't help everyone who comes to us. And so I'm just trying to grow and help as many people as I can. And it's going to take me a little while before this gets passive.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
What's one thing that you wish you could do more of, but your business commitments hold you back?
I can't say travel on this one, right? No, truthfully, at the moment, the reality of the situation is the one sacrifice that I had to make this all possible was I had to be willing to work late at night, because we're 6 hours ahead of Eastern time where we are. And it's 9:52 p.m. where I am right now. And my family and my kids are all probably eating their sixth pizza because I had to kick them out of here so that they didn't ruin the sound for this event that I was looking forward to so much. And that's the thing that I regret the most. I never want to sacrifice my family, but inevitably, like you talking, is we have to make choices and we have to carve out times. And the flip side of the coin is that they get to see me work, and they know my kids get to see what entrepreneurship is firsthand. And I didn't have that as a kid. So I'm really grateful to be able to show it to them.
That's awesome. So if you could go back in time, 18-year-old Mitch, what advice would you give yourself about building a business?
I would tell myself to quit drinking at 18. I know that's not what you're asking, but that's really what I would tell myself. College was fun. And I feel like I wasted 4 years just partying balls. And at that critical age, at that juncture in life, I feel like it was a waste. And if I could go back and change that, I've always worked really hard. My dad died when I was young. I had to start working when I was young. And so I was always proud of the experience that I had. And I always worked my way through school and all of that. But I think I've learned, maybe it's just because I've gotten older now and my hangovers were terrible, but I can't really tolerate it anymore. And so giving up alcohol was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
That's awesome, man. That's great.
What's your number one strategy for creating time and financial freedom for yourself?
Delegating as much stuff as I can to people who are more efficient than I am. And that is my wife and my business partner. I love talking to people, and I could talk to people all day long. But when it comes to getting stuff done, they are so much better at it than I am. And so I just, give them the keys and let them drive.
Yeah. That's awesome. Mitch, this has all been,
it's been great, Mitch.
Gold, for real. If someone owns a business and wants to sell it for top dollar, where can they find you?
At Boutique Fitness Broker. That's the website, the Instagram, all of the things. And it's easy to find us. And if you want to just follow along and see our shenanigans across Europe and feel inspired, please do. We love it. We love being a part of this community. Thank you guys so much for having me on. Honestly, it really means a ton to me. And thank you for everything that you are doing to help bring all this stuff to light and make it to normalize exiting your business. So important.
Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks again. It was super great having you on the show. And just for all of our subscribers, listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.
Yep. Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for On the Exit.